Well, first, as they say, the news. The news is that Max Verstappen has got a 5-place grid penalty for the Brazilian Grand Prix. Not for the sprint race. We had qualifying for the sprint on Friday, but he has that 5-place grid penalty because they've had to fit yet another new internal combustion engine into the back of the Red Bull, another new Honda ICE. As I've been saying in various live streams and videos over the last couple of months, reliability could yet play a major role in the outcome of the World Championship. We don't see any issues at all with the Mercedes power unit in the back of the McLarens, touch wood, but we have had issues with Max losing power in the race and, as we see here in Brazil, a change of internal combustion engine. So he starts the Grand Prix with a 5-place grid penalty, which is bad news. At the moment, the forecast for Sunday is dry. It was wet, but it looks like it's going to be dry now on Sunday. But the forecast for Saturday for the sprint race is for thunderstorms, scattered thunderstorms. No predicting exactly when they're going to happen in Brazil, of course. So compounding all the issues that Red Bull and Max Verstappen have now against the rise of McLaren, Mercedes, and of course Lando Norris growing increasingly nearer in the Drivers' World Championship, and McLaren looking ever stronger in the Constructors' Championship. So that out of the way. The other news was that Kevin Magnussen who's so good around Brazil and coming off a great race, of course, in Mexico, developed an illness before practice today, before sprint qualifying, and his place for the weekend has been taken by that ultimate stand-in racer, Oliver Burman, who of course replaced Carlos Sainz at the beginning of the year and finished 7th. Very, very good drive in Saudi Arabia. And now it is Kevin Magnussen being replaced by the driver who has his seat, of course, for 2025, and that is Oliver Burman. And what a great job he did too, getting through into Q3 ahead of Nico Hülkenberg, who's also no slouch, of course, around Interlagos. Anyway, the other big news, I guess, is that Oscar Piastri has taken the pole for the sprint race. I say I guess because I think at this stage of the year it's almost inconceivable to think that McLaren could yet again shoot themselves in the foot, and if Oscar is in front of Lando tomorrow and they're kind of ahead of everybody else, that they're not going to give the win and maximum points to Lando at this stage of the season. I think that will probably happen. But it was interesting how Oscar did indeed get the pole for the sprint race, because he alone did 2 laps on the soft tyres in Q3. They were out in mediums, of course, in SQ1, SQ2, the first 2 sessions, and then onto the soft tyre for SQ3. And Oscar did the right thing. He went out on a scrub set of softs and did a time that would have been good enough, as it turned out, for about P5 on the grid. Came in for a new set literally with 1 or 2 minutes to go, went out, and that's how he got the pole, eclipsing the time that Lando had done on a new set out of the pits as SQ3 began. Lando, of course, was then on a scrub set and tried hard in the first 2 sectors, but when he saw that Oscar had gone that much quicker, he backed out of the second sector and pulled into the pits to give the pole to his teammate Oscar Piastri. Very, very good planning on this occasion by Oscar. Kind of surprising in a way that Lando didn't do the same thing. They had those 2 different strategies at McLaren, but then the weather was ominous as well. And you could argue, I think, McLaren probably did the right thing. They split their options. They got Lando, the most important driver at this stage of the year, out to get his time in the bag on that new set of softs, which meant he was going to be on scrub tyres at the end. Whereas Oscar, they took the gamble. Maybe it wasn't going to rain. They put him out on the scrub tyres and then new set right at the end when the track was slightly quicker. The other drivers, for their part, the 2 Ferrari drivers and Max Verstappen, the main contenders, of course, and I don't really include, sadly, Mercedes in that now. Lewis Hamilton didn't even get out of Q2, and George Russell was 2 or 3 tenths away from Max Verstappen's Red Bull times. So let's just talk about the 2 Ferraris and the Red Bull. All 3 of them left it really, really late. We're talking literally 2 minutes to go before they left the garage on that one set of new softs. So they hadn't gone out and done a scrub lap as Oscar had. And I think that was, again, a mistake on their part, if only because it's switching from mediums to softs. It's quite a big shock. And from Oscar's point of view, it worked really well to go from the medium to scrub softs and then onto a new set of softs. And that really bedded him in for the lap, set him up for the lap. Whereas the 2 Ferrari drivers and Max were going out on that new set of softs, blind if you like, and it was a difficult job for them. Charles Leclerc it was, he got the better lap in, just ahead of Max, just ahead of Carlos Sainz, but it was incredibly close, and the lap passes very, very quickly in Brazil. And what I've done here to try and get a better feel for what happened in SQ3 on the soft tyre, I've averaged out the results of the top 6 drivers as they finished in each sector. Bear in mind, sector 1 is all about top speed, high speed braking into turn 1, down through the center S's, down the back straight into turn 4, very, very hard braking into turn 4, but a long corner that requires really good balance. And Max, for example, complaining that he didn't have great turn in initially with the front flap they'd taken out of the car. And then sector 2 is all about slow speed turn in and traction, lots of switchback hairpins up and down the hill. And then sector 3 is a combination of medium high speed, traction, and also top speed, long straight there, and a long uphill plug as well for the power unit coming out of that last corner, that last hairpin. So although Oscar Piastri got the pole, you can see how good and how quick Lando Norris has been all day on the medium tyre and the soft tyre, and in terms of top speed. He's just got this circuit, McLaren and Lando together got this circuit completely sussed, and they are by far and away the quickest combination around there. Something I said would probably happen in the dry when we were talking about that a couple of days ago with Cameron, and it's difficult to see how Lando wouldn't have been super quick around Brazil. If it's wet, different story, of course. Lando probably still will be very good, but in the dry, 1.67. If you average out his 3 results, he was first in sector 1, second in sector 2, and second in sector 3. So an incredibly good average for Lando for that 1.67. Oscar Piastri second to Lando in sector 1. First in sector 2 on the really good tight stuff, which is where you would expect the new set of soft tyres to be so good right at the end. But only P4 in sector 3, possibly overheating the tyres a little bit in sector 3. Not much difference in top speed, but nonetheless a very, very solid P2 if you take the averages. What a great performance by McLaren-Mercedes today. Absolutely outstanding. Charles Leclerc, 3.7, a little bit away from McLaren's, but you could say appreciably ahead of Max and Carlos Sainz. He was 7th only in sector 1, but then really good in sectors 2 and 3. Sector 2, he was 3rd, just behind the McLaren's, and he was actually quickest in sector 3. So very good performance from Charles Leclerc. The only thing that really caught him out there was sector 1, and maybe he didn't get the tyres up to temperature at exactly the right moment. It was very difficult, the warm-up here with the Pirellis in Brazil. This is the softest in the range of the Pirellis. But to get that soft tyre to work for one lap was really, really difficult. Max Verstappen only 5.7, and that gives you an idea. This snapshot as we go into this last phase of the season, only 4 races to go now if you include Brazil. Max 5.7 compared with Lando Norris 1.67. And look at Max's results. 3rd in sector 1, only 5th in sector 2, and only 9th in sector 3. And it was all really, really close. But that reflects also that the Red Bull isn't as quick as the McLaren in a straight line. We're talking 2 or 3 kilometres. And for sure, it doesn't have as good a slow speed turn in or traction. Probably about there in terms of medium speed corners. But Red Bull still struggling to take the pace, take the race to McLaren. And McLaren here with yet more upgrades, running a new beam wing on the car just to tune the car in terms of the downforce, the specific downforce of Interlagos, some sort of medium range downforce that they have. And what a great job they're doing in the aero department at McLaren in that sense. Carlos Sainz 5.7, exactly the same as Max Verstappen, which you could say is quite good from Red Bull's point of view, I suppose, splitting the Ferraris, but equally for Max to be doing the same sort of average sector times as Carlos Sainz tells its own story, that the Red Bull is far and away from where we've seen it in the past. Carlos 5th fastest in sector 1, 4th fastest in sector 2, and only 8th quickest in sector 3. And remember, Charles was fastest of all in sector 3, so that's where Carlos lost all his time. And then finally George Russell, who was 4th in Sector 1, 7th in Sector 2 and 7th in Sector 3. So Mercedes really struggling. And that showed with Lewis Hamilton sliding all over the place on medium speed corners, locking up, just generally looking very uncomfortable with the car. A lot of talk about getting the tyre temperatures right, how to do the warm-up. But Lewis never, ever, sadly, got it together in that sense. Just quickly looking at the other times after George. P7, Pierre Gasly, another excellent performance in the Alpine Renault, consistently quick. Let's hope he has a decent race for a change. And then Liam Lawson, also excellent in the B-Carb Honda. Interesting how his sheer pace is really starting to unsettle Yuki Tsunoda, who didn't get out of Q2. Alexander Albon, P9 for Williams Mercedes. Another good performance from him. And Oliver Berman, outstanding again in the Haas Ferrari, to be driven, as I say, by Kevin Magnussen, who was fine in the debrief on Thursday, but then got a stomach bug last night and really felt dehydrated and lost all his energy. So, yeah, get well soon, Kev. You would have gone well today, for sure. Lewis Hamilton will start 11th for the sprint race. Disappointing day for him yet again. The car, as I say, just sliding all over the place. Nico Hulkenberg 12th. Sergio Perez, another disappointing day for Sergio Perez. One wonders how much longer this whole Red Bull Sergio Perez saga is going to drag on. Franco Colapinto 14 for Williams Mercedes. And Valtteri Bottas did well to get into Q2, knocking out Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon in the process. And just to go back to Alex Albon, and he just got into Q3. He was in the garage when the checkered flag was out, and he got bumped down to 10th place. So he was very, very fortunate to get through into Q3. And finally, let's just have a look at the speed trap for sprint qualifying. Lewis Hamilton 3.29. I guess he would have liked to have sacrificed a bit of that top speed to have a bit more grip in the warm-up phase for his car. Lando Norris, that tells its own story, doesn't it? Also 3.29. I've had to actually put a dot and leave some of the drivers out before we get down to Ferrari at 3.25. You can see there the job McLaren have done to have that amount of grip and that amount of top speed. 4 kilometers an hour, big difference between McLaren and Ferrari. So there we are, sprint race, as I say. Max has no penalty for that, so he'll be lining up in P4. He really needed to compensate for that penalty by being on the pole, so this is not a good start to the weekend for him, and it could indeed get worse as the weekend progresses, because even if he's really quick tomorrow in qualifying for the Grand Prix, that puts him, P6 on the grid. He's probably going to be P7, P8 realistically, and that puts him right in the middle, dare I say it, of the proximity of the first corner shunt, and we've seen quite a few of those in Interlagos. It's a very, very difficult bit of road to get through without hitting someone or being hit by somebody, and Lando probably will be miles up in the front in free air, and this already, as I say, does not look like a good weekend at all for Max and Red Bull. But anything can happen, of course, and tomorrow it could be wet. As I say, the forecast for Sunday still dry, but it was wet, and it could be wet again, who knows. I'd just like to finish by expressing my sympathy and thoughts for all those affected by, and of course the families who are bereaved in the floods we've had here in Spain, in Valencia. Just unbelievable. There was going to be a Formula E test at Valencia next week. Of course, that's now been cancelled. It's been moved to Jarama in Madrid. And where we are, we're very fortunate. It was very isolated, but our hearts and prayers go out to all those affected by those terrible floods. So there we are. Big thanks to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, and to TrackNinja. Big thanks to you too. See you tomorrow.